Hello, incredible story enthusiasts, welcome to Story Room Lab. Before we delve into the story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss one of our dramatic episodes. Now, tell me in the comments below, where are you watching this story unfold from? I love seeing our community grow across the globe. The title is a cruel kind of poetry, isn't it? In a broken mirror. It's the truth of how I first saw him, and how I eventually saw myself, or perhaps, the only way I could ever truly see us. Before him, my life was polished and predictable, like a freshly wiped pane of glass, clear, functional, and utterly unremarkable. I was Anya Petrova, an art historian specializing in the Byzantine era, meaning I spent my days deciphering the silent language of mosaics and icons. My apartment in the older, quieter district of the city was my sanctuary, smelling faintly of old paper and Earl Grey. I had a fiancé, Julian, who was equally predictable, a meticulous lawyer who planned our life together on a shared digital calendar. He was a good man, steady and true, and that, I had convinced myself, was enough. But a life built on enough is a fragile thing when a whirlwind decides to pass through. It happened on a Tuesday, the kind of dreary, soul-sucking day that makes you question why humanity ever left the equator. I was at the renowned antique shop, the Reliquary, a place I frequented not for purchase, but for the sheer tactile pleasure of touching history. I was examining a 17th century icon, its silver oak-clad tarnished black with age, when I heard the crash. It wasn't the gentle slip of a teacup, it was the violent, crystalline sound of glass surrendering to gravity, a sound that rips the silence in half. I spun around, my heart immediately lodging itself somewhere beneath my ribs. Standing amidst a cascade of sparkling fragments was a man. He wasn't frantic, or apologetic, or even embarrassed. He just stood there, tall and lean, his silhouette framed by the dusty afternoon light filtering through the shop window. He looked like an etching in a forgotten book, sharp angles, dark, unruly hair, and a presence that stole the air from the room. He was staring down at the disaster, what remained of an ornate, 3-foot-tall standing mirror, now just a pile of shimmering, worthless shards on the old Persian rug. The owner, a diminutive, perpetually stressed woman named Mrs. Elena, rushed over, sputtering in Russian a string of words that translated roughly to ruin and irreplaceable. The man finally looked up, meeting my gaze across the distance, and the moment was so charged it felt like a static shock. His eyes were the color of glacial ice, a startling, pale blue against his dark features, and they held an intensity that didn't just look at you, but seemed to look through the placid surface of your existence. "My profound apologies, Elena," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that smoothed the sharp edges of the incident, yet somehow made it more dangerous. He didn't sound remorseful, just factual. "I seem to have broken your beautiful looking glass." He knelt gracefully, not to clean, but to pick up a single, sharp shard of the silvered mirror. He turned it over in his fingers, watching the light fracture and scatter across the ceiling. It was this gesture that arrested me. Not the crash, not the expense, but the sheer, unapologetic focus with which he examined the debris. He treated the broken piece of glass with the same reverence I reserved for a fragment of ancient pottery. Mrs. Elena was demanding his details, threatening lawyers, the usual dramatics, but his attention seemed fixed on me, or rather, on the reflection of me in the tiny piece of broken mirror he held. The effect was immediate and dizzying. Seeing myself fragmented, distorted across multiple planes, I felt suddenly exposed, as if the usual mask of Anya, the calm, scholarly woman, had slipped. "I'll cover the cost, naturally," he finally told Elena, tossing a platinum card onto the counter without a glance. It was a clumsy error on my part. He stood up, finally letting the shard drop back onto the rug. Then, he walked directly toward me. "The icon," he said, stopping a mere foot away, his proximity shattering the quiet bubble of my neutrality. "Is it Sienese or Venetian, do you think? The gilding has a specific mineral warmth that suggests the former, but the linear rigidity of the faces is decidedly late Venetian." I was so thrown by his presence that my academic brain momentarily blanked. "Late Venetian, I believe," I stammered, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. But the Hodegetria pose is more common in Greek models from the period right after the Fourth Crusade. A smile, slow and devastatingly genuine, pulled at the corner of his mouth. It didn't reach his glacial eyes, but it changed the landscape of his face entirely. You know your history, Anya Petrova. My breath hitched. How do you know my name? He merely tapped the small, discreet silver name tag pinned to my blouse, a necessary evil in my line of work when consulting at a public venue. Observation. A scholar should appreciate the art of looking closely, don't you agree? He extended a hand. His touch was warm and firm against my chilled skin. Elias Vance. And to answer your question truthfully, I think the icon is a glorious forgery. And I believe the mirror was broken quite deliberately. The statement was so audacious, so utterly outside the realm of normal Tuesday conversation, that I couldn't help but laugh, a small, startled sound that felt foreign even to my own ears. Why would you deliberately destroy a beautiful antique mirror? Elias leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially, and the scent of him, something woodsy, expensive, and a little like rain on hot asphalt, enveloped me. Because, Anya, sometimes the original image is too flat, too predictable. You have to shatter it to see all the different, hidden angles of the truth. He was a disruptor, a catalyst. He wasn't offering me a seat at Julian's carefully arranged dinner table, he was offering me a hammer. He gave me his card, a thick, black rectangle devoid of any title or logo, just his name and a cryptic international phone number. I'm in town for a short time, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I collect things. Rare, complex things. I think I just stumbled upon a new one. He didn't say what he collected, but the implication that I was now on his list made my spine tingle. Before I could formulate a sensible, scholar-like response, something about academic boundaries or the inappropriateness of the suggestion, he was gone. He walked out of the reliquary and back into the rainy afternoon, leaving Mrs. Elena sputtering and me standing in a patch of light, surrounded by the silence and the glittering dust of a shattered mirror. I looked down at the tiny, sharp piece of glass resting near my worn leather boot. In its infinitesimal surface, I saw not a reflection, but a flash of a woman I didn't recognize, a woman whose heart was now beating an erratic, unfamiliar rhythm, suddenly awake to the possibilities of breaking things and being broken. I walked home that evening in a daze. The world seemed different, the colors brighter, the sounds sharper. Julian called, his voice tinny through the phone. He was confirming the seating chart for his firm's charity gala. Did you have a good day, darling? He asked, his voice full of that steady, unquestioning affection. It was broken, I whispered, then quickly corrected myself. No, fine. Just a long day looking at old saints. I didn't tell him about the man who broke the mirror. I didn't tell him about Elias Vance, the collector of complex things, whose business card now rested, like a dangerous, unexpected secret, beneath the Byzantine textbook on my bedside table. I didn't tell him how, for the first time in years, the flat, clear pane of my life felt shattered, and how utterly, terrifyingly exhilarated I was by the potential of the beautiful, sharp pieces. The mirror was broken, but the world, I realized, was suddenly in stunning focus. It seems you're ready for the story to continue. Given the spark ignited in Chapter 1, the next step must involve Anya making a choice that fractures her predictable life further. I kept the black business card beneath my copy of the Mosaics of Ravenna for exactly 48 hours. Julian noticed nothing. He was busy outlining our future, discussing mutual funds and the merits of neutral-toned curtains for the dining room. Every sentence he spoke was a reinforced concrete block added to the sturdy, unyielding structure of our impending marriage. And every block added felt like a layer of earth pressing down on my chest. I felt like an artifact meticulously preserved in a protective casing, safe, valuable, and utterly inert. But Elias Vance had left a chemical residue on the air I breathed, a faint scent of danger and expensive wood. I couldn't stop thinking about his audacity, the way he treated destruction like a necessary prelude to discovery. The broken mirror wasn't just an accident, it was a metaphor he had physically manifested in my presence, a challenge hurled at the flawless, reflecting surface of my life. I spent those 2 days arguing with myself. Anya the scholar demanded rational caution. He is a charlatan. He damaged property. He is impulsive and arrogant. But Anya the woman, the one I rarely allowed to surface, the one who cherished the vibrant, fractured light on the floor of the reliquary, whispered a different truth. He saw you. Truly saw you, in a way Julian never has, or perhaps, never needed to. On Thursday morning, a day typically reserved for the dry, dusty silence of the university archives, I called the number. It connected immediately, not to an answering service or a secretary, but directly to his voice. Vance, he answered, the single word clipped, direct, and completely arresting. It's Anya, I managed, my voice sounding shaky, like a novice actress delivering a line in a vast, empty theater. A soft, almost musical laugh traveled across the line. Anya Petrova. I had begun to think you'd decided to remain perfectly preserved in your Byzantine world. I'm calling because of the icon. The glorious forgery, as you called it. I can't stop thinking about it. You seemed so certain. This was a convenient lie, a professional pretext I clung to like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. The truth was, I wanted to hear the rest of the sentence he had left unfinished in the reliquary. The forgery is merely a detail, he corrected smoothly. It was the context that interested me. The setting, the lighting, the sudden introduction of a truly complex variable, you. But if you truly want to discuss art, I'm at an atelier downtown. It's messy, unconventional, and currently full of half-finished projects. Entirely unlike your current environment, I'd guess. Are you brave enough to step out of the frame, Anya? He gave me an address, a nondescript warehouse near the derelict industrial docks, the kind of place I would usually avoid, a stark contrast to the manicured historical gardens and ancient stone where I usually spent my time. He made it sound like an invitation to a secret society. I didn't tell Julian. I told the archive supervisor I had a headache. It was the first truly spontaneous, uncalculated decision I had made in years. I drove my modest, sensible car through the grittier parts of the city, feeling the further I went, the more the polished veneer of Anya Petrova began to crack. The atelier was huge, drafty, and smelled powerfully of turpentine, oil paint, and cold stone. It was chaos, but a vital, creative chaos that felt like a jolt of electricity. Sculptures in various stages of completion were draped in sheets like ghosts. Canvases leaned against walls, their vibrant, challenging colors screaming against the gray backdrop of the warehouse. Elias was not wearing a suit. He wore a heavy, dark sweater stained with paint and worn jeans. His hands, the ones that had held the sharp shard of glass, were now dusted with what looked like plaster. He was working on a colossal marble bust, not classical, but abstract, all impossible angles and deeply carved shadows. Welcome to the mess, he said, not pausing in his work, merely gesturing with a dusty chin. I assume you came for the full explanation of the glorious forgery. I came for the truth you promised, I said, walking toward the bust. It was intensely unsettling, dynamic, and seemed to capture the very essence of fragmentation. He finally put down his chisel, turning to me fully. Truth is relative, Anya. In art, as in life. The Venetian icon, it was too perfect. The chemical analysis of the silver indicated a purity achievable only with modern refinement processes. The story was right, the style was right, but the composition was a lie. A flawless imitation of reality is often the most profound kind of deceit. His words resonated with a sudden, painful clarity that had nothing to do with art history. He was talking about my life with Julian. A flawless imitation of reality. Why do you collect forgeries? I asked, moving closer, mesmerized by the intensity of his gaze. I collect the stories of the forgeries, he corrected, leaning back against the marble. The geometry of the lie. What does the artist want you to see? What are they trying to cover up? Real authenticity is always ragged, always shows the tool marks. That icon was too smooth. He took a step toward me, closing the distance again, a familiar, disarming intimacy. Like your fiancé. The sudden, brutal mention of Julian felt like a blow. Don't, I warned, my voice hardening. You don't know anything about him. I know the type, Elias countered, his eyes holding mine. The perfect frame. The seamless narrative. But the frame exists to hold the picture still, doesn't it? And you, Anya, are not still. You are dynamic. You are complex, like the light refracting across 100 broken surfaces. I saw you when the glass shattered. You weren't upset about the loss, you were fascinated by the destruction. Tell me I'm wrong. I couldn't speak. The heat in the room, the smell of the paint, the oppressive, beautiful chaos, it all combined to dismantle the careful structure I had built around myself. I wanted to defend Julian, defend my quiet, predictable future, but the words caught in my throat because I knew Elias saw the ragged tool marks in my own soul. What if I want the seamless narrative? I whispered, feeling the fear of exposure prickle on my skin. He reached out, his plaster-dusted hand tracing the line of my jaw, a touch that was simultaneously rough and incredibly gentle. Then you would never have called me Anya. You would have stayed safe in your archive, dusting off the past. But you didn't. You came here, to a place of creation, a place where things are made by breaking ground and getting dirty. What do you truly desire to create, or perhaps, what do you desire to break? He didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he turned and retrieved a small, elegantly carved wooden box from a dusty workbench. He opened it, revealing not jewelry or money, but another piece of the shattered mirror from the reliquary. It was a larger shard this time, about the size of my palm. I kept this one, he said. Look. He held it up, and in the fractured, distorted reflection, I saw myself, my hair disheveled from the drive, my coat slightly askew, my eyes wide and dark with a fear that was strangely thrilling. But beyond that, I saw Elias, his image split into a dozen slivers surrounding mine, a jagged, beautiful collage of two people who had no business being in the same frame. This is how I see you, he murmured, his breath warm near my ear. Broken into 1,000 complex angles, each one reflecting a different truth. Not the flat, boring image Julian sees. Not the flawless forgery. This is the real geometry. He placed the shard into my hand. It was sharp, heavy, and cold. Holding it felt like holding a fragment of my own fractured destiny. It was a tangible piece of the lie I was living and the truth I was now chasing. I knew, standing there amidst the turpentine and the unfinished sculptures, that I had already begun to dismantle my entire life, not with a crash, but with a quiet, calculated choice. The choice to call him back, to look at the geometry of the broken glass and find it more beautiful than the whole. I had stepped out of the frame. The seamless narrative was over. I carried the shard of glass in my coat pocket like a talisman, a dangerous secret that hummed with a low, electric frequency whenever my hand brushed against it. It was cold and sharp, a constant physical reminder of the broken pact I had made with my future. I couldn't throw it away, it was the only piece of authentic, unpolished truth I possessed. The days following my visit to Elias's chaotic atelier were a blur of intense contrast. By day, I was back in the hushed, orderly world of the university, advising PhD candidates on the precise dating of mosaics. By night, I was back in the impeccably neutral-toned apartment with Julian. He was busy planning our pre-wedding party, meticulously calculating RSVPs and canopy counts, utterly oblivious to the seismic shift occurring beneath the foundation of our life. Every action Julian took, every steady, predictable kindness, now felt like an accusation. When he kissed me goodnight, it wasn't a spark of passion, but a familiar, comforting weight. He saw me as a finished work, Anya Petrova, the elegant, intelligent fiancé who fit perfectly into his life's perfectly constructed frame. He never looked for the ragged tool marks or the fractured angles. He didn't need to. I was, in his eyes, a flawless portrait of contentment. Darling, I just finalized the itinerary for the Greek honeymoon, Julian announced one evening over a dinner that was, inevitably, perfectly balanced and cooked to specification. We'll start in Santorini, then spend 4 days in Athens, time for you to visit the museums, of course. I've scheduled your free time from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Tuesday. I stared at the pristine fillet of salmon on my plate, suddenly unable to swallow. The idea of scheduled free time, the absolute encapsulation of our relationship, made the air feel thin. Julian, I started, the name feeling heavy and foreign on my tongue. I met someone. The words came out ragged, unplanned, and immediate. The sudden quiet that fell over the dining room was deafening. Julian merely set down his fork, his movements slow and precise, the very picture of contained shock. He didn't look angry, he looked confused, as if I had suddenly begun speaking in a language he didn't recognize. Met someone? He asked, his voice low and utterly devoid of emotion. Who? A colleague from the Byzantine conference? Is this about that grant application? The fact that his first assumption was professional, not personal, was a greater indictment than any shouted accusation. No. Not a colleague. His name is Elias Vance. He's an art collector. Ah, Julian said, a flicker of something like understanding crossing his features, quickly replaced by a cool dismissal. A client. Is he causing trouble? I can have my firm draft a cease and desist if he's being aggressive about an acquisition. No, Julian. He's not a client. He's a man who broke an expensive mirror and laughed about it. And he sees things I didn't know were visible. I pressed the cold shard of glass through my coat pocket. I've spent time with him. Julian finally comprehended the magnitude of what I was saying. The controlled composure cracked, just slightly, around the edges of his eyes. You've spent time with a collector who apparently has a disregard for property and no professionalism. Anya, what are you talking about? Are you trying to shock me? We are weeks away from our wedding. I know what we are weeks away from, I whispered, tears finally blurring my vision. I know the perfect life we have planned. And the terror, Julian, is that I don't belong in it. It's a flawless imitation of happiness, a seamless forgery, and I'm tired of trying to pass it off as authentic. Julian finally stood up, his jaw tight. He told you that. This. Vance. He's filling your head with romantic nonsense about breaking things. That is not love, Anya. Love is building, stabilizing, protecting. I offer you stability. I offer you a future that won't shatter at the first sign of pressure. But what if I want the pressure? I cried, pushing back my chair. What if I want something that feels real, even if it's dangerous? Elias told me that the only way to see the truth is to shatter the flat surface. And he's right, Julian. I've looked into his eyes, and I saw a dozen fractured reflections of myself, and they were all more honest than the one in our bathroom mirror. He looked utterly defeated, not by rage, but by the intellectual nature of my betrayal. So, you choose the man who embodies chaos over the man who offers you certainty? I choose the man who made me feel like an unfinished project, I confessed, the words tasting like copper and freedom. Not a completed portrait. I left the apartment an hour later. I didn't pack much, a few clothes, my favorite book on Byzantine icons, and, critically, the shard of broken mirror. The note I left for Julian was short, apologetic, and final. I drove straight toward the industrial docks, toward the only person who had ever seen the beauty in my own fragmentation. I found Elias in the vast, cold space of his atelier, exactly where I had left him, covered in plaster dust, carving the marble bust. He didn't look up when the doors slammed shut behind me, but his chisel stopped. I was beginning to wonder if you'd stay framed, he said, his voice quiet against the hollow echoing of the warehouse. I broke the frame, I said, walking toward him, the words shaking with adrenaline. I told Julian. I left. He finally looked up, his glacial eyes seeming to take in the entirety of my upheaval. There was no triumph in his gaze, only a profound, almost sorrowful intensity. Anya, he said, his voice softening, I wanted you to see the angles, but I never intended for you to burn the whole canvas. Your certainty was safe. I am not safe. I pulled the sharp piece of mirror from my pocket and held it out to him, offering the symbol of my destruction and rebirth. I know. That's why I came. The forgery is gone. All that's left is the geometry of the truth. He took the shard, turning it over in his plaster-dusted fingers. This time, he didn't look at the reflection, he looked only at me. The shattered glass is just the beginning, he murmured, the shadow of a smile returning. Now we have to figure out how to put the pieces back together, Anya. And in my world, the pieces never fit back exactly the way they were before. He placed the mirror back into my hand, but this time, his fingers closed over mine, securing the grip. It wasn't the steady, polite pressure of Julian, it was a rough, vital connection that felt dangerous and entirely necessary. I knew then that my old life was over, and the geometry of the lie had been replaced by the perilous, exhilarating angles of truth. We stood in the heart of chaos, ready to begin the impossible, broken process of creation. Let's delve deeper into the complexity and mystery of Elias's world. For the new relationship, born from chaos, must now face the practical, and potentially dangerous, reality of his life. The world is a different shape when you are living a lie, and a different texture entirely when you are living a truth you haven't yet defined. Leaving Julian was an act of shattering the mirror, starting a life with Elias was the beginning of trying to piece together the fractured, sharp reality. For the first few weeks, the atelier was our world. It was a space of raw creation and uninhibited passion. Elias and I lived on the edges of his immense, abstract sculptures and under the vast, vaulted ceiling that leaked light and rain. We didn't have a kitchen table, we ate takeout amidst the scent of turpentine and marble dust. There was no schedule, no plan, just a relentless, consuming intensity that obliterated the memory of my old, measured life. Our connection wasn't built on shared histories or common goals, it was built on shared observation. He didn't just look at me, he studied me, the way I studied a rare mosaic. He saw the shift in my pupils when I was tired, the tension in my hand when I wrote, the exact moment the intellectual armor of Anya the scholar cracked to reveal Anya the woman, vulnerable and hungry for the unpolished truth. You're still looking for the logic, Anya, he told me one morning, watching me trace the impossibly convoluted angles of his latest marble piece. You're trying to find the historical precedent for this chaos. There is none. You have to experience the breaking before you can appreciate the final geometry. Our conversations were dazzling, moving from Byzantine art to particle physics to the ethics of collecting looted artifacts, a subject he approached with a chilling, detached intellectualism that occasionally made my blood run cold. It was during one of these late-night debates that the deeper, darker facets of Elias's world began to emerge. You said you collected the stories of forgeries, I prompted, wrapped in one of his heavy sweaters, the broken shard of mirror resting on the workbench beside us. But your business card, it's blank. What do you actually do, Elias? He paused, holding a heavy glass tumbler of whiskey, staring into the liquid as if searching for answers there. I'm a facilitator, he finally said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register that demanded my complete attention. I acquire objects that need to be removed from conventional circulation. Sometimes, they are forgeries that need to be exposed. Sometimes, they are genuine masterpieces too fragile or too volatile for public display. And sometimes, they are objects whose true historical context would be inconvenient for the powers that be. Inconvenient? I pressed, the scholarly alarm bells ringing loudly in my head. Elias walked over to a dark corner and pulled back a heavy canvas sheet. Beneath it wasn't a sculpture or a painting, but a steel-reinforced vault door, cleverly disguised as a wall of stacked shipping pallets. Every collector needs a good way to secure their finds, Anya, he said, punching a complex, multi-layered code into the lock. The tumblers clicked with a series of heavy, metallic sighs that sounded like the past protesting its containment. He opened the door just wide enough for us to squeeze through. The air inside the vault was dry, cold, and smelled of priceless antiquity. It wasn't large, but it was filled with treasures that made my professional mind reel. There were Mesopotamian clay tablets under specialized lighting, a jewel-encrusted dagger that looked dangerously recent, and nestled in the center, on a rotating pedestal, was the source of my growing dread, a large, antique silver frame, empty save for a sheet of perfectly flat, polished black glass. "What is this?" I asked, stepping closer, my voice hushed. "This is my centerpiece," Elias said, his eyes gleaming with a possessiveness I hadn't seen before. "It's the twin to the mirror I broke in the reliquary. Or rather, the intended original. Before it was shipped to the shop, someone replaced the silvered glass with a perfect pane of obsidian, a flawless, non-reflective surface. It's the ultimate anti-mirror. It absorbs all light, all reflection. It shows you nothing but your own shadow." He went on to explain his theory, weaving a complicated tale of a rival collector, an illicit trade route, and a symbolic gesture meant to blind the victim with flawless deceit. "I tracked the real silvered mirror to the reliquary," Elias concluded. "But it was a reproduction, a piece of manufactured nostalgia. The genuine antique mirror, the one that held the true reflection of history, was shattered years ago and scattered, piece by piece, across the continent." The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. "You didn't break that mirror to show me the truth. You broke it because you are searching for the pieces of the original. That's why you kept the shard." He didn't deny it. "I'm a collector of fragments, Anya. The whole is often a lie. The pieces are always honest. The mirror I broke was just a symbol, a beacon. I'm looking for the scattered shards of the true-looking glass. Each piece holds a different reflection of the past, a different secret." I looked down at my hand, at the familiar, sharp piece of glass resting on the workbench. It wasn't a symbol of our connection, it was a clue in his lifelong treasure hunt. I was not the complex variable he had stumbled upon, I was a useful asset, an art historian who could decipher the clues that the fragments revealed. The pain of this realization was sharp, like the edge of the glass itself. It was a new layer of fragmentation, the realization that I had traded Julian's predictable comfort for a love that was, fundamentally, a component of a professional obsession. "Am I a fragment to you, Elias?" I asked, the question ringing hollowly in the vault. "Am I just another piece of the truth you're collecting?" He stepped closer, his shadow falling across the blank obsidian mirror. "Anya, look at the obsidian. It is flat, flawless, and reflects nothing. When I look at you, I see 1,000 beautiful, complicated reflections. You are not a fragment, but you are my compass. You have the history, the knowledge, the sight to understand what these pieces truly mean. You led me to the reliquary. You understand the power of the shattered image. You are the only person who sees the geometry of the broken world the way I do." He didn't say, "I love you." He spoke of geometry and sight. But in that moment, standing before the black, absorbing emptiness of the anti-mirror, his intellectual appraisal felt more profound, more devastatingly honest, than any conventional declaration. It was an acknowledgement of my unique, fractured nature, and a clear statement of the dangerous role he needed me to play. I had broken my life, and now, I was inextricably bound to a man who literally collected the fragments of broken history. I was in his labyrinth now. The revelation that I was a compass in Elias's obsessive quest, not merely a lover, was a dizzying truth. But the strange thing about being fractured is that you lose the capacity for conventional pain, the emotional surface is already broken. I embraced my role. Julian had offered me a perfect, predictable frame, Elias offered me the beautiful, terrifying work of collecting the pieces of a fragmented, dangerous world. Our search for the scattered shards of the true antique-looking glass became our obsession, our distorted honeymoon. Elias was a master of clandestine acquisition, moving through auction houses, private collections, and the shadow economy of art with seamless efficiency. I, with my deep historical knowledge and eye for authentic period detail, became his intellectual vanguard. We followed leads across 3 continents, a fragment hidden in a Swiss bank vault, a piece disguised as a decorative tray in a Moroccan riad, and another embedded in the spine of a first-edition Renaissance treatise. With each shard we collected, we returned to the cold, dry air of the atelier vault. Elias would meticulously document the piece, assigning it a location and a number in his elaborate geometry of the lie. We discovered that each piece was engraved with a single, partial word or symbol, forming a cryptic message when placed together. The culmination of the search led us back to where it all began, the reliquary. Elias received a coded message indicating that the final, largest fragment was in the possession of Mrs. Elena, the shop owner. We knew she was just a fence, a caretaker for the item, pressured by the original rival collector. The atmosphere was thick with tension. This wasn't about scholarly debate, it was about a perilous exchange. We met Elena at a neutral location, an abandoned, seaside warehouse battered by the relentless wind. She was nervous, clutching a heavy, cloth-wrapped object. "This is the last piece," she hissed, her eyes darting nervously around the cavernous space. "It's been in my family for years, hidden. The collector, he wants it back. I need to be gone tonight, Elias. Give me the price." Elias, calm and utterly predatory, placed a small, velvet-covered box on the worn metal table. "The funds are already secured in an offshore account, Elena. Show me the piece." She hesitated, then slowly unwrapped the cloth. Inside lay the fragment. It was huge, the size of a dinner plate, and unlike the small, sharp slivers we had collected, this piece was perfectly round, its edges polished smooth. In its surface, the glass seemed thicker, richer, holding a profound, smoky depth. Elena took the velvet box, confirmed the transaction on a burner phone, and vanished into the stormy night, leaving us alone with the final shard. I rushed forward, my hands trembling. This piece was different. Not only did it complete the message etched on the combined fragments, a single, chilling Latin phrase, veritas in laceris stat, truth stands in tatters, but its reflection was unlike anything I had ever seen. I held it up to the weak, flickering warehouse light. Instead of just mirroring my face, the ancient glass seemed to layer my image. I didn't see one Anya, or 1,000 broken slivers, but two, the calm, structured scholar I had been, superimposed over the intense, liberated woman I had become. The two images overlapped, creating a composite, complex, and entirely authentic self. It wasn't flat, and it wasn't perfectly fractured, it was integrated. "The true mirror wasn't meant to be fixed," Elias murmured, stepping up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. His presence was a comfortable, dangerous weight. It was meant to be collected. To be understood as a series of different, complex truths. "This piece," I whispered, staring at the double reflection. "It's the synthesis. It's not about finding the original whole, it's about recognizing that the whole is made of every shard, every wound, every broken angle." He rested his chin on my shoulder, looking at our combined reflection in the heavy, ancient glass. The image showed Elias, the complex collector, the disruptor, and me, his compass, standing together in the ruins of the past, fully visible in the truth we had chased. "And you, Anya," he said, his voice husky. "You are the final, most valuable piece of my collection. The one that reflects my own fragmented truth back to me." I turned in his embrace, looking up at his glacial eyes, eyes that had seen through the flawless deception of my former life. I didn't ask him to leave his dangerous world, or to promise me stability. I had found my own stability in the exhilarating chaos of his. "So, what happens now, Elias?" I asked, holding the round, ultimate shard between us. "We stop collecting the mirror," he said, kissing me with a finality that settled the chaos in my soul. "The quest is complete. But the truth, our truth, that is just beginning." He took the round shard, and instead of rushing it to the sterile vault, he held it up to the sea-battered window of the warehouse. The rising sun caught the ancient silvering, and for one blinding moment, the reflection wasn't a double image, but a singular, clear light, casting the image of two people standing together, finally seeing themselves reflected, not in a perfect, flat pane, but in the beautiful, accepted wreckage of their own fractured lives. We were two halves of a shattered world, deciding to build our future, piece by dangerous, honest piece. Our love wasn't a polished surface, it was a complex, beautiful tapestry woven from the 1,000 reflections of truth.